Dr. Matthew Murphy's career has been rooted in classroom level teaching, and since 2012, he has been the superintendent of the Ramsey Public Schools. He is an adjunct professor at Ramapo College for its educational leadership program and active in other regional organizations. Dr. Murphy also contributes on a volunteer basis to West Bergen Mental Health Care, for which he is the president of their board of trustees. His professional and volunteer roles are common ground with his leadership of Ramsey's award-winning stigma-free program that builds empathy and understanding in the realm of mental health. In June of 2020, and congratulations in advance, he was recognized with the Communicator of the Year Award for the various ways that he cultivates two-way discussion among staff, parents, and the public. His commitment to open dialogue and clear information proved to be a critical asset during the past year as schools and families and employees and businesses were working together during this crazy, unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic. And so we are very excited to welcome you this evening to our forum, and I'm going to give you the spotlight and turn it over to you. Thanks once again for being with us tonight.
Well, thank you, Liz, and thank you to Westside for sponsoring, along with West Bergen, these Wellness Wednesdays. I know our relationship started before the pandemic, but boy, you had wonderful foresight to be able to put together a regular schedule community dealing with wellness, because now more than ever, our communities need spiritual wellness, physical wellness, emotional wellness. I will say I'm glad to have heard that this is being recorded, because I'm going to send the link of the opening to my 86-year-old mother, because those were nice words, and I need to remind her that her son, who became an elementary school teacher, and I think she cried for 3 days when I said, "Mom, I'm not going to be, a lawyer. I'm going to teach second grade. Look at me now, Mom." Right? So thank you, Liz, and thank you for coming out. I have former parents from the early 1990s here, which is so great. I have parents from the Ramsey School District, former students from Ramapo College here. Thank you. So I do appreciate everyone coming out, and I think this is a very important topic, and it's very near and dear to my heart. I just want to start by saying I'm not speaking on behalf of the Ramsey Public Schools. I'm not speaking on behalf of West Bergen, even though Michael is here and I am president. I also like to remind everyone what my mother would remind you, and she would, that I'm not a real doctor. My sister married the real doctor, the orthopedic surgeon. I'm a doctorate in name only. So I'm not a clinician, okay? So I bring that up because I'm speaking just from my experiences of being in education. I've been married 23 years, and I have two children, 20 and 17 years old. So that is the lens in which I embrace life at. But of course, if anyone has serious mental health issues, reach out to a professional. So I thought I would spend, the first 20 minutes or so talking about the transition that is coming sooner rather than later to schools in light of COVID-19. And there's no doubt that 15, 16 months ago, in March, schools were humming along like they had been for a number of years. And I got it wrong. I was convinced we were only going to be closed for 2 or 3 weeks. I never, in my wildest imagination, thought that here we would be May of 2021 and still talking about I don't think I've ever heard the phrase social distancing before COVID. And now I am a pandemic expert and I know more about COVID and transmission and Cali indexes than I ever thought I would. So I definitely got it wrong. And I think schools were slow in our response, a malaise, so to speak, in that March, April, May, when we were just sitting around dazed and confused, so to speak, not getting a lot of direction from our federal and state and local agencies on what to do. And I acknowledge that. And we are going to look and feel different for a while, but I actually think the light is at the end of the tunnel. And for the first time in a long time, meaning these last 16 months, I'm actually feeling quite hopeful. And I want to take you through what I think is upcoming and in ways that you can help if you have young ones or older kids, or you just have friends or neighbors who might be struggling. So there is no doubt May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I tried to fit into my green shirt, but the COVID-19 has impacted my ability to get into my t-shirt. So I need to go up a size and get a larger green t-shirt. But we know that the research says 1 in 5 suffer from a mental illness. I think it could be 1 in 4 to 1 in 5. I actually think with COVID, you're going to see that number be something more like 1 in 3 with our young people. Now, again, I'm not a doctor and I don't have any research, but I can tell you just from, being involved in our school system, that there's no doubt a rise in anxiety, depression in children, but also in the adults. And I would gather that I think that the adults, staff, teachers, parents, have been equally impacted by this as much as the children. And I know there'll be research done decades after this on this, but unquestionably, there's a rise in these two things that I call anxiety and depression. Not, of course, I'm not diagnosing them from a clinical perspective, but just from my observations. But I also want to point out that the same anxieties that children feel have risen because of this. Some students are actually thriving in this environment. And believe it or not, I know that sounds, unusual, but we have students who are thriving in the all remote because the anxieties of going to school, the anxiety of the social, trying to be accepted, they're gone. They're gone. They don't have to worry about these things of going into middle school and all the typical adolescent feelings. Children are not having these social anxieties that come with arguably the middle school and the high school, and they're thriving in an all remote setting. So while we see a rise in anxiety and depression in some students, we see others who are thriving. I don't say they're equal. I know they're not equal, but if we're going to have a conversation about this, I think it's only accurate to state that some children are thriving in an all remote setting. And that's something for schools to learn from and for. So a couple things just to kick this off is there is a lot of help in this area. I mean, a lot of help. I would tell you that I've been in Bergen County for over 30 years, starting in Wyckoff, starting at Coolidge School with Billy. See, I knew who he was. There's a lot of help out there. You're not alone. You're just not alone. So even if you don't have a child in school and you want to, and you don't know where to reach out, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to Michael in West Bergen. But there are a lot more resources. I think we've become far more enlightened than we were, say, 10 years ago, when we're talking about mental health and mental illness. So number one, know that we're not alone. The friends and neighbors that you talk to on the street, they may not want to talk to you about how they're feeling, or they might use words glibly to say, oh yeah, I'm a nervous wreck, or last night I was anxious, or I'm going crazy right now because the college acceptance, day came. Those words we have to work on as a society to use them correctly, but know that you're truly not alone. And there are a lot of resources out there. Second, I think it's really important to talk about recognizing, understanding, and labeling emotions. So again, recognizing what the emotion is, understanding it, and labeling it correctly. I think a lot of times we mislabel our emotion. If you're interested, there is a terrific book by a Yale professor, Mark Brackett, and it's called Permission to Feel. It's not a dense book. If you don't have the money to purchase it, please stop by Ramsey. I'll give you a copy and you can just pay it forward. But Permission to Feel is a wonderful book that talks about recognizing, understanding, and labeling and so forth our emotion. And I think that's really important as we make the transition back into schools. Parents especially, recognize your own emotion, not just your child's emotion. This transition is going to be hard on you, not only because of how much you love your children, and I know I have two, right, which I love most of the time. They're 17 and 21, you'll understand that, but most of the time I love them. But you have to recognize your own emotion. So I was on the phone today with a parent who was struggling because we've combined cohorts, and the parent was struggling because the parent could not get past his own anxiety of his child not being socially distant. And when we talked, and I just let him talk, we had to work on him recognizing that it was his own emotion and understanding it and labeling it. So parents, don't be hard on yourself. Understand that this transition, you might be anxious about your children going back to school or going back to play dates. Play dates are coming, okay? Days out in the park are coming. Rec teams are out there, as you know, and whether or not you're in Ramsey or Ridgewood or Saddlebrook, kids are riding around. If you go to the mall, the pandemic is over if you go to any of our local malls. But that doesn't mean that we're not feeling anxious of allowing our 7-year-old to be at a play date in someone else's house. That could be a big step for some of us. And we just need to recognize that, understand that, label it. So one of the reasons schools worked real hard to get back to normalcy before September, and I know we did in Ramsey, was we wanted to get those students who we think were languishing. Now, Adam Grant, I don't know if you read Adam Grant, it's a wonderful New York Times article about languishing. And I just want to read what his definition is because I think he summed it up. I have it on my website. Languishing is the neglected middle child of mental health. It's the void between depression and flourishing. It's the absence of well-being. You don't have symptoms of mental illness, but you're not the picture of mental health either. Think about that. You don't have the outward symptoms, but you're not the picture of mental health. You're not functioning at full capacity. I see that with my own children. They're just not functioning at full capacity. Languishing dulls your motivation, disrupts your ability to focus, and triples the odds that you'll cut back on work. It appears to be more common than depression, and in some ways it may be a bigger risk factor for mental illness. Now, we could say a seventh grader languishes by definition. On a good day, a seventh grader and an eighth grader is languishing. But I have no doubt that this pandemic has put a lot of our children in that void, that in between void that he talks about, the void between flourishing and depression. Again, recognize it, understand it, label it. So that's why getting back to normalcy for many of our school districts was so important. Getting up, the routine, getting up, brushing your teeth, having breakfast every day. For us, our K-5 was every day, but our 6 through 12 was every other day. And there was no doubt that we were really concerned about our young adults. So getting back into a routine is just so important for young people. Now, that's going to sound strange because we're entering in the summer, right? The summer is when we oftentimes break routines. So I can hear every seventh grader screaming my name. Murphy, are you saying I got to write a book report once a week and email that to grandma? Are you saying I have to study math facts every day because you told my mom I need a routine in the summer? No. Okay. What I'm suggesting is summers are oftentimes when we break from a routine. Think about what the routine will be once school ends. Everyone needs downtime, but I don't think that the downtime should look the same as in other typical summers. Many school districts are going to offer summer learning opportunities. Take advantage of them. I think it's a great opportunity, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So recognize, understand, and label emotions. Now, if you think it's a little bit more than languishing, we have, in mental health first aid training, we ask questions such as look for live, love, laugh, and learn. Do you see changes in behavior, drastic changes in behaviors? Their ability to carry on relationships, the ability, do they drop off from school? Those are usually, those drastic changes in behaviors are things to look out for. And please, if those things have happened, that's when you should be reaching out to your school communities. The ability to get up and shower and do the basic things that they were able to do beforehand. If they didn't love school beforehand, the pandemic isn't going to make them love school even more, possibly. That isn't a change in behavior. I'm talking about a change in behavior. And the tough part, parents, especially of young adults and adolescents, is a lot of times they change friend groups. One day they're best friends with Matthew. Oh, I'm not friends with Matthew anymore. Mom, come on. That was so last Thursday. I'm now friends with Michael. Didn't you know that? Didn't you get the memo? I tweeted that out. That's on Snapchat. So you're going to have to discern what is typical adolescent young people behavior, but look for that. And then last, just be open to the conversation. Michael and I often say this all the time when we're talking drive, and for some reason, kids think there's a wall in between the back seat and the front seat, and they can't hear you. Just be open to the conversation and do it without judgment. And that's very hard to do at times because we love them and we know, you've been through it all and you want to say, no, that's not the right decision, but try it. So recognize that you're not alone. Recognize, understand, and label emotions. Look for changes in behavior like live, laugh, love, learn. Be open to the conversation. Now, I mentioned for schools are going to offer some summer learning opportunities. I think this is a wonderful idea. However, Matthew Murphy speaking, not the superintendent of schools and not the West Bergen president. I don't think learning loss should be your primary focus. That phrase drives me a little bit, gets me a little emotional, because I think our children have learned a lot of things during these past 15 months, a lot of things that they would never have learned before. And I'm not talking about Google Meet, Zoom, Schoology. They've learned how to be patient. They've learned how to pivot. They've learned how to deal with disappointment. They've learned how to manage relationships by far. So our children, in my belief, have learned a lot. I do think for specific students, especially ones with special needs and learning differences, there might be some loss of progress that they've made. But I'm telling you, from an academic, content, skills, and knowledge perspective, your schools are going to be able to catch your children up, because learning is a progression. So have faith in your schools. So when I talk about summer opportunities, I'm not talking about going to pay a tutor to drill in math facts. If your children can learn, they will learn what they need to do. I'm talking about different summer enrichment opportunities. I think if you've ever thought about a summer camp or a sleepaway camp, this is the year to think about it. I think that is a wonderful opportunity for young people to get back into the social routine, get back into learning from each other, okay? Trips to the zoo, trips to museums. I think those are wonderful, what I call experimental type of learning opportunities. In Ramsey, we're going to do a kind of an academic model and more of an experimental stepping stones experience for our younger children, just because that to me is more important than knowing your math facts. Listen, folks, by third grade, you know your math facts, or we're just going to continue to tell you you need to know your math facts. It's just one of those things that happens. And we'll continue to work on it, but that's not nearly as important as what I believe they lost in this past 18 months. And that is how to navigate friendships, how to navigate relationships, how to communicate with each other. So anything you can do over this summer to have them in a routine and have them experimental learning, have those experiences such as day camps, summer camps, week-long focus. Some of our colleges, local colleges offer, a week in STEM, a week in archaeology. Those types of learning is, I think, ideal as we move from these past 18 months. And hopefully you're back in, like we are, for some normalcy to get that rust over the out of the system as we look forward to next September. Now, for those districts that still might be all remote and you don't have the ability to come back like we have before June, I think this summer is even more important. I urge you, if you're an all remote by choice or because the district isn't, to really think about your transition plan going into next year, because you may not realize that your children, while they may be thriving in many ways, are going to be uncomfortable going into the next grade level. I'll give you an aha moment. We have a large middle school. We have 200, depending on the grade level, 220 students. We have a bunch of sixth graders who have never opened a locker because they came from fifth grade and they've been all remote. We have to remember that they're not typical seventh graders when they come back next year. They missed some just experiences because, again, for very legitimate reasons, they weren't in school for all of sixth grade. From 8th to 9th grade, same thing. So if you're in Ridgewood, which has 1,800 kids in that high school, You might be a sophomore who has never stepped foot into Ridgewood High School. That's a big deal because you're expected to be a sophomore, but yet you didn't have that ninth grade experience. So reach out to your school system, walk the school, try to first identify those things that you might have missed because of this year, and don't just take it for granted that your children are okay with it. I'll tell you something. Going to a middle school, the number one fear is lockers. Am I going to be able to open the locker in time? And these poor little sixth graders, who weigh 70 pounds, carry around 200 pounds of books because they're afraid that they won't get to the locker, open it, and get to their class in time. And in high school, it's a maze. These high schools are so big. What rooms do I go to? That's a very typical ninth grade concern, but be careful or be conscious if your ninth grader has not been in school. So just think about those experiences. So again, have a routine for the summer, not necessarily math facts, but get them used to group activities, team building type of events. So that would be something that I would suggest, especially for the younger children up through 8th grade, because I think they, in many ways, have lost a lot of that social emotional learning that takes place in our younger schools. I also want to point something out, and I know I'm running a little bit out of time, and this is something that it's a very targeted group, and that is our graduating seniors. So as you prepare for college, and I can share my own personal experience with my daughter. She was lucky. She's a sophomore, so she had freshman year to come in. But these current freshmen right now are really struggling. We've had, just talking to other superintendents in the county, one of the highest rates of students not being successful freshman year. And I'm really concerned about this current crop of 12th graders going into next year. And these freshmen, what we're being told is it wasn't typical freshman experience, right? They either lived by themselves or they were isolated in dorms. You didn't have the typical group activities that you have your first semester freshman year. You didn't have the time because it wasn't in-person learning. A lot of it was hybrid. You might be on campus, but stuck in your room, learning how to navigate freshman year. Remember, for those of us who went to school, that first few weeks of freshman year could be very tough on individuals. And even though we tell our children, everyone feels the same, they all feel isolated, guess what? They all were isolated this time. In previous years, they weren't isolated. They just felt alone because they didn't have their group from Ramsey High School, their go-to group that they cultivated for 12 years. They literally had no group and they had no ability to make a group. You couldn't hang out at the quad. You couldn't go to the football game. All those typical things that we take for granted, that freshman year of college was taken away. Now let's fast forward. College acceptances came out, but a lot of things are going to be different. A lot of our children struggled in picking a college. Why? You couldn't go visit it. And if you visited, it was empty. So if you have a freshman going into college next year, please be aware that it's going to look and feel different. And I just, caution everyone. Colleges are behind the 8 ball when it comes to mental health counseling. I mean, it's prehistoric. So my suggestion to anyone who is sending a freshman off is it's about human connections. Really ensure that your college student tries to connect with an adult an advisor, a teacher, or the dorm guru, whoever, because I think schools and our community have access to wonderful things like West Bergen, colleges. You know, my daughter wanted to reach out to a counselor who's a 4-week wait just because she was struggling with midterms, you know, the anxious 4 weeks. Now, we see that in many ways in our healthcare system, but when she was home, at least she had mom and dad, right? So again, just understand that college is, I think, prehistoric in how they've handled mental health. Talk to your child every week over the phone. I don't care if it kills them. I know Snapchat is great. A text is great. How you doing? In many ways, it's wonderful, but talk to your child every week. I want to hear your voice. I just want to hear how you're doing. Mom, dad, you know by that sound. And now with FaceTime, you can see how they're doing. I really encourage you to do that. And then also talk to them very openly about recognizing and understanding and labeling their own emotions. Yes, they're 18. In many ways, they're grown adults, not just legally, but they've grown up, but they still have more growing up to do. So help them recognize. Don't you recognize and label their emotion, okay? But help them recognize, understand, and label their emotion so they can solve their own problems. So I know that's a little twist. You probably didn't think I was going to just talk about freshman year, but I have to tell you, of everything I know we'll be ready for our K through 12, I am anxious, and I'm using that word deliberately, for my freshman class of college, because I past history of colleges and universities have not treated us well. So those are some, again, suggestions, ideas that I have for the transition. It's, you know, we have 20 minutes, 30 minutes, Liz. I thought I would open it up to questions, everything you always wanted to ask a superintendent, but we're afraid to.
Yeah. And thank you so much. I hope people will feel free to put that in the chat or to privately, if you want to keep it anonymous, to message Matthew or Michael. Michael, can I bring you up here and
Sure.
spotlight you there?
Absolutely.
You guys are a good team. So
Matthew, well done. I'm going to jump right in with a chat question that's sitting in our chat, and it is: do you think kids will be back in the classroom full-time this fall?
I do. That is my expectation. I have. I think it's the right thing to do as of now. You know, the vaccination was a huge hurdle for school districts to overcome or wait for it, because, like in our situation, most of our staff is older, and they were very vulnerable. And now with the announcement that Pfizer is going to get the okay for vaccinations from 12 to 18, right now it's 16 and above. I do think we will, and I do think it's going to get back to normal quicker than one expected in the fall. I really do. I think certain things are going to be in place. I don't know this. I learn about school edicts like you do through Twitter, okay? So governor gives me the same information at the same time as you do. But I do think you're going to have things such as wearing masks for a while, things like that. But I think it's going to be back sooner rather than later to normal.
Great question and great answer. Another quick question, which kind of speaks to our kids who are currently in school part-time, 7:30 to 12-ish. How can we help them transition to that full day experience where they're going to be in that full, quote unquote, regular day? And what can we do to help them?
Oh, gosh. If I had an answer on how to motivate a freshman to get up at 7:30 in the morning. I would tell you that I would be retired by now, Michael. Yeah, that's interesting. One of the things that's an interesting question. For me, it's about having the conversations early that you're going to have to understand that you're getting up at 7:30 next year. And I don't know if that question means they're in now at 7:30 or they're hybrid.
No, the question really is that many of our students have gotten used to a pattern, Northern Highlands, from getting to school by 7:30 and you're done by 12:30. No, whenever you're in school, that's the short period of time. And then if you need something in the afternoon, you go on Zoom and it's an extra help or it's a thing. So the day has been truncated. There's no lunch. There's no, there's a lot of things that got pulled out. And so the day is shortened. But ostensibly next year, the day will be back to a full 7:30 or 7:20 to 2:50 or whatever it is.
Right.
With all the attending extra stuff. And they're not used to that at all.
Yes, but they'll be trapped. So there'll be no getting out of it, Liz. We can run laps with them for the extra 2 hours. But that I don't have an answer to that in the sense of, for those students, it's really a stamina issue. They're used to having off at 12:30 is what I'm hearing you say, right? And what do they do? That's why we made our day a 5-hour day. We just took lunch out because we didn't want it shortened for that reason in high school to make it longer. And we just took the hour out for lunch. I don't have an answer.
I'm gonna jump in on this one and just with a thought. Our kids are incredibly resilient and they know what they need. So if I were a family, I would be sitting down soon together to sort of put this on the table. This is going to be a challenge. I'm worried. I'm concerned that the day is going to feel long to you. What do you think we can do about it? How can we help you, Billy? How can we help you, Jeannie? What do you think? How are your friends going to deal with it? Get them often, if our kids love to talk about their friends and their issues, maybe not ours. So it's a little safer, a little easier, right, to talk about others. But sometimes sort of putting it on them, not on them to come up with a solution, but it really is amazing how often kids have the answer to a question that we as parents struggle with, and we get stalled. Sometimes we as Matthew talked about earlier, take that ride to Dairy Queen, take the ride to Grandma's, take the drive, and just kind of put it out there. I'm a little concerned about it. What do you think? And then let them talk, right? And let that kind of dangle out there. So
I would just suggest a little change, like pick the fireplace or something cooler, Michael. For gosh sakes, Dairy Queen.
Love it, Matthew. A big fan of the fireplace. Cool doesn't come to mind when I think about the fireplace, but okay.
No, let's burger with a 14 grill. Come on, Panera Bread. Let's go, Michael.
Fair. Do you think the public schools will have the authority to mandate the vaccine? A question from the audience.
No, I do not think we will. I know there's a bill pending in the legislature to require the vaccination for all incoming public school students. That was pulled at the last minute. There's talk about bringing that back in time for September, but I do not.
Okay. And I think Nicole has a question. She was going to chime in. By the way, I'm just sort of using the chat feature, but we certainly can hear folks. So to the extent that you want to take yourself off mute, because everyone is automatically on mute, but to the extent that you want to take that off and jump right in, Nicole.
Yeah, I'm Nicole, and hi, Matt. Thank you. Matt was actually my principal my first year teaching. And that was a long time ago. So we won't reveal the year, but he's been a leader ever since. So I do appreciate it. And one thing that stood out that Matt said was that phrase about learning loss. And it also triggers me. It bothers me because I really appreciated that he pointed out and wanted to thank you, Matt, for pointing out the successes that have happened this year. And I think I've spent a lot of time, I too have 2 teenagers. And so we spent a lot of time trying to find like all the good things that have come out of this year and that real life learning. I think my question for the superintendent hat is more, and hopefully like other parents may be thinking this is, are there conversations taking place in schools about just curriculum and changing learning to accommodate these skills that kids have acquired and dealing with kind of what has happened? I know it's probably a really loaded question, a long-winded answer, but who better to answer it?
Than a long-winded guy. It's good to see you, Nicole. We have it. Shame on us if we don't take this opportunity to take what is, take the win, so to speak, and learn from this and make revisions to our curriculum. One of the things I was really proud of in Ramsey when we knew this was coming down the pike was it made us really determine what was most important to teach in a shortened day on a hybrid schedule. So we spent a lot of time before each marking period really looking at our curriculum and synthesizing what is truly the big idea that we need to do. What are the essential skills and knowledge they need? Because the curriculum can be very broad, but now when you have this shortened period of time, meaning a 4-hour day like Liz was referring to at her son's school district, or every other day, it made us really think about what is most important to teach and for the children to understand. So I think I know conversations are going on. Shame on us if they're not going on. And I think you're going to see, I think, a more effective curriculum because of this year. Next year, I really do.
Excellent. Great answer. Do you anticipate that there will be separate learning tracks or options for families to choose either in-person or virtual learning for their families? I'm assuming we're talking about next September. So
yeah. Okay. Remember, I don't speak on behalf of anyone.
For the record.
For the record. So here's the thing. One of the great things about New Jersey is we have 660 or 650, 640 school districts. And we love our local control. We love knowing who the superintendent is and running into him at Uncle Giuseppe's. And we love all that. And it's a hometown feeling, right? Many of you define where you live by your school district. I'm a Ramsey Ram. I'm a Ridgewood Marauder. I don't know, we're maroon or something. But we love that. The downside to that is it doesn't allow us to scale at any effectiveness. So if you would have asked me, one of the wonderful things that we learned about during this pandemic is that students thrive in a small percentage of students thrive in an all remote setting. If we had larger mechanisms to put that into play, the answer I would say is yes, but it's such a small percentage in each of our school systems that it's not, we just don't have the capacity to offer both in-person schooling and an all remote option. However, if we could get a couple of, ninth grade sections going of all remote. That's the downside of being really small like we are in New Jersey, is that we don't have like a county mechanism to put that into place. I think for certain students, it is an ideal learning environment, but it's a small percentage. So I don't think schools are going to offer multiple tracks through the school system. They might offer all remote learning through a third party, but I don't think you're going to see school systems offer all remote like we did this year in our school systems. You just don't have the manpower, right? Elementary school, it's easy to do. I can have one section of first grade, but in middle school, when you're sharing teachers, you just don't have enough social studies, science, and so forth to allow all remote to go on. So, but I do think we could if we had a county mechanism to do that.
Interesting. Really, I get your answer, which is really operational. It's just a pragmatic answer. It's just not right. It's math in some ways, right? You can't plug in and the equation just doesn't work.
It just doesn't. You don't. We're a small medium school district of 2,600 kids. It just you can't make it work with any real efficacy, right? Streaming is not an answer. I don't care what anyone tells you. When you stream from a 7th grade social studies classroom, it's not the same as if it was all remote or you were in person. It's just the technology is not there yet. One day it will be. So it's not for smaller size districts. I think if they did it county by county, I think that would be a winner.
Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. Kind of a demographic question in the air here. Do you see enrollment decreasing in a school district if parents feel that their current school district isn't doing enough with regards to providing a full educational experience for their students, even if it means paying out of district tuition or enrolling in a private school? Are you seeing any of those trends? Are you anticipating anything?
Yeah, we did. We lost students to parochial. Because they didn't have the same rules in many ways that we had to do in September. I know many of them are coming back. I don't think long-term we're going to see a decrease in enrollment. I just don't. I think if next year was going to be the same as this year, no doubt that enrollment would go down. But like I said in the beginning, I think the light is at the end of the tunnel, and next year is going to be a very normal year in many ways.
Got it. All right. I just want to be mindful if anyone wants to jump in. Otherwise, I do have a couple of more questions. Feel free to jump
Bill,
in.
you're proud. You got cut off there, Bill Burdick. Are you a proud Ramsey Ram?
A proud Ramsey resident of almost 40 years. No, I should say 42 years. 2 daughters that went through Ramsey school districts, and I did quite well school-wise.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for coming out, Bill.
So I'm very supportive of the Ramsey school district.
I love it. What years did your daughters graduate?
1999 and 2000.
Okay. I married a Ramsey Ram, but she's a little bit older than your daughters.
Okay.
So.
That's great. Matthew, I want to just swing back if we could, and I'm mindful of time. We're starting to wrap up. I love your idea about the educational opportunities, my word, not yours, this summer in terms of museums and other outings that are going to sort of feed us in some ways. What's the thinking there? Do you? I just want to drill down that out a little bit further. Is it the opportunity to sort of spend time together? That's the family therapist in me, right? That's the lens through which I'm looking. Is it the opportunity to actually absorb some of that information in those opportunities, or help me understand that a little bit?
Yeah, you're right on both accounts. It's just not the social and emotional, the hanging out with different friends. That is part of it. But I also think that they're missing that, lack of a better phrase, that intellectual conversations that is just hard to have over Zoom because it's so prescribed in many ways. You know, as a former 5th grade teacher, I can just imagine the amount of planning that has to go on. that spontaneous learning that takes place when you're walking through and you make an observation with your friends. That a lot of that is missing because we weren't in person. And moms and dads, if you're not a teacher, it's hard for you to understand this. They learn as much about how to be a good person in school as much as they do about facts, about math, or the Constitution. That is invaluable learning. You know, the fact that I can recall Billy from almost 30 years ago, right, Mrs. Spellman? I can picture him because he made a connection with me. And I'll probably learn afterwards if whether or not Billy liked me or not. But the fact of the matter is, and that's missing. And I think we have to get back to that because we haven't had that in the past 18 months. And the more we can do that through this, experience type of learning, please don't make it where they have to fill out 20 questions about the Bronx Zoo or what's your favorite animal and, do a TikTok on my visit to the Museum of Natural History. However, going with a group of people that they're interested in, I'm dating myself on the experiences, but they might be interested in NASCAR. They might be interest-driven events in which they can learn from each other as much as the experience is really, really important. That's why I'm sure you send your children to camp. You learn a lot at camp. You learn how to be independent. You learn how to problem solve. You learn how to be creative. And that is hard to do over Zoom. And I think teachers, not just in Ramsey, but throughout this county that I've known and that I've been able to observe, have tried to do that successfully, but you just can't because you're not in person.
Sure.
And we need to get back to that before September, folks, because it's going to be very awkward come September.
Agreed. I'm a big fan of that. Let's start talking now about it. Yeah. Let's start working on that now. Our last question, because we're running a little bit tight on time, but I love this question for two reasons. One, it is Mental Health Awareness Month. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and so we are very proud of that at West Bergen Mental Health Care. I would suggest to you, if you follow any of Dr. Murphy's social media, and there's a lot of it on there, I would suggest to you that you follow it. You will learn a lot about mental health. You'll learn a lot about actually what it's like to be a great human being. So let's hear this question. As a sixth grade teacher with a limited amount of time in the classroom each day, what are some ways that you think mental health and awareness can be addressed and brought up in the classroom? I love this question.
It's a fantastic question, and kudos to the person for bringing it up. It makes me feel hopeful that the message of mental health is getting through to educators, because for me, I don't think there's a bigger issue on our horizon, teachers, parents, than the mental health of young people. I think it's the number one issue facing education. And I don't say that with any drama. So I think simply, ask, how are you doing? How can I help? Is there anything that I can help you with? That simple phrase, which is not just, did you not understand the concept, but how are you, Michael? You don't look the same. Set a time afterwards. You weren't your spontaneous self. That check-in is invaluable to kids, invaluable. And we need to do that actually more over Zoom, not less. Because when you're in person, you can see through the side, right? If you're a sixth grade teacher, you can see upwards, downwards, sideways, because you have to wrangle cats when they're sixth graders. So but you can't see that over Zoom. So first check in with them, just asking them how they're doing. That will ask them how you can help them, and talk about, if you feel comfortable, how you're feeling. So a lot of times with my administration and my board of ed, when I was going through the stressful times of COVID, I would say to them, right now, I'm feeling very uncomfortable because I'm not sure what the right decision is. And I've been through a lot, folks, as a superintendent. I've seen a lot, done a lot, but this threw me for a loop because for the first time, I felt enormous pressure on the safety of the health of 500 staff members and 3,000 kids. That weighed very heavily on my mind as I had a balance between bringing them back in person, the whole thing. I'm blessed to work in a community where my teachers worked with me, but so acknowledging I'm feeling really overwhelmed right now is, I think, a great model for us to do. And I'm not saying you should model that you're overwhelmed to your students, but just talking about recognizing, understanding emotions when they come up is really, really important.
Love it. Love it. So with that, we're about at 8:30. I would like, because I do not get this opportunity often, I would like to very publicly thank Dr. Murphy, not only for tonight's presentation, but for the amount of time and effort and energy that he puts into blood, sweat, and tears, all on a volunteer basis with West Bergen Mental Health Care. So I do not get this opportunity. So I'm gonna take this opportunity to thank you so much, very, very publicly. And thank you for what you do for students and for the world indeed. And so thank you.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Liz. And truthfully, it's just a calling for me. It's just, I've always wanted to be a teacher and make a difference in people's lives. I'm the superintendent of Ramsey, but you don't need to be in Ramsey to ask for help. You can find, Google Ramsey. You'll have my contact information. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. But no, everything remains confidential with me. And you don't need to be a parent. You don't need to live in Ramsey to know that you're not alone. And if there's one takeaway here, mom, dad, uncle, grandfather, you're not alone in this. You now met someone who will help you through whatever journey you have, and know that will be beside you each step of the way. And I mean that.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful way to end our evening together. And thank you all for coming. This is a weekly forum, and you are always invited to come back. We will continue on our programming. But our message for tonight is, in addition to thank you and to continue to be well during this month of mental health awareness and always. Have a wonderful night, everybody, and thank you for joining us.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Liz.